Hello, this is problem number 1 found on page 508 of your Geometry Part 2 textbook. This is just simply finding how to do trigonometric ratios. You must remember that when you're dealing with trigonometric ratios that sine is always opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is always adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is always opposite over adjacent. A way to remember that is what we call a little acronym called SOHCAHTOA. Again, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. And together, if you can just remember that word, that might help you to know what to do. So if you've got a triangle here, and remember, trigonometric ratios just work on right triangles, which we have here. One of the sides is 8, one of the sides is 15, and one of the sides is 17. Now, the other thing I want to point out is we're looking at the sine, the cosine, and tangent of t. That means we're looking from the perspective of t here. So if we're looking from this perspective or this angle, then sine of that, sine of angle t, again, if sine means opposite over hypotenuse, then that is going to be 8, because that's opposite, and this is hypotenuse. So that's where they're getting the 8 over 17. Okay? So erase this again. If you're doing the cosine of course is adjacent over hypotenuse. So again, looking from the perspective of t, this is the adjacent side and this is the hypotenuse. So that's where they're getting the 15 over 17. And then finally, if you're doing the tangent of a line, tangent means opposite over adjacent. So again, if we're looking from the perspective of t, opposite would be 8 and adjacent would be 15. And so that's where they're getting the ratio of 8 over 15. Okay? Now, let's try the got it section. Use the triangle in problem 1. What are the sine, cosine, and tangent ratios for G? So what we have to do here, if you'll let me erase this, we're just simply changing our perspective. So that means we're looking up here from this perspective. So I'm going to put my smiley face up here. If we're looking from this perspective, then this becomes the opposite side. This becomes the adjacent side. And the one across from the right angle, of course, is always the hypotenuse. So when we look at this, it said use the triangle in problem 1. What are the sine, cosine, and tangent for G? So again, if I said sine of G, cosine of G, tangent of G, just like they did before, remember sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's going to be 15 over 17. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And again, once we've labeled that, that becomes 8 over 17. And then finally, the tangent of coming from the perspective of G, which is this angle, is opposite over adjacent, which ends up being 15 over 8. And that's how you do basic trigonometry. Remember, don't forget to use SOHCAHTOA as just a way to help you remember that terminology. Hope this was helpful.